They thought she was just another angry black woman. They didn't know she used to wear a badge too. It all started on a warm Monday evening in South Atlanta. The kind of evening where kids ran barefoot across sidewalks, unbothered by the heat, and grandmothers sat on porches fanning themselves with church bulletins. Life was still hard in South Side, but there were moments, slivers, where it felt like peace. That peace shattered with the sound of shouting. A crowd had gathered on 5th and King, just outside an old laundromat that had been closed for years. Two police cruisers sat parked at odd angles, red and blue lights flashing against the brick walls. In the middle of it all, a young boy, maybe 17, was face down on the pavement, hands behind his back, a knee pressed hard into his spine. "Stop resisting," the officer barked, though the boy wasn't moving. The crowd yelled back. Phones were out, people filming. You could feel the tension in the air, thick, electric. And then she stepped forward. Janelle Carter. She didn't shout. She didn't raise a fist. She just walked up calmly, hands where they could see them. "That's Malik," she said, voice steady. "He's one of my kids. He didn't do anything." The officer, white, late 40s, name tag reading Langley, turned to her like she was a threat. "Ma'am, back away. Now. I work at the Southside Youth Center," she said. "You just slammed a kid with no record into a wall. That's assault. This doesn't concern you." "It does now." The crowd got louder. Phones zoomed in. Langley's hand moved fast. He grabbed her arm. She didn't pull away. She just stood there, jaw tight, not saying a word. "You're under arrest for interfering with an officer," he snapped. "I didn't touch you. You did now." He twisted her arms behind her back and slammed her against the cruiser. People screamed. One man yelled, "You know who that is? That's Miss Carter." But Langley didn't care. His face said it all. He thought she was just another mouthy black woman who didn't know her place. He didn't know the truth. Not yet. The video went viral by sunrise. Clips from 5 different angles. People yelling her name. Her calm voice, the cuffs, the smirk on Langley's face. Headlines followed fast. Youth leader arrested during police altercation. Chaos in South Atlanta. Who is Janelle Carter? Local hero or lawbreaker? The internet did what it does best. It chose sides. One side saw a threat. The other saw a hero. Inside a holding cell, Janelle sat on the concrete bench, silent. Her wrists were raw. Her eyes sharp. She'd been through worse. A young public defender came to see her, nervous. Shaky hands, flipping through notes he barely read. "The officers say you were aggressive," he said. "They're adding obstruction and assault. They're offering a plea." She stared at him. "Do you know who I am? I think you run a youth center." She leaned forward, voice cool and controlled. "I graduated from Harvard Law in 2011. I was a federal prosecutor for 5 years. I've cross-examined men like Officer Langley in federal courtrooms 10 times the size of this." The lawyer's jaw dropped. "Wait, you're a lawyer, not just a lawyer." "I was their worst nightmare." She stood up. "Tell the judge I'll be representing myself." 3 days later, courtroom for B. Fulton County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, community members, even a few off-duty officers, and sitting at the front bench, the arresting officer, Langley. In full uniform, calm, confident, smug. He had no idea what was coming. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered, Judge Monica Delaney. She paused when she saw who was at the defense table. Her eyes widened, just a little. Janelle stood tall, no lawyer next to her. Just herself, just her truth. And this time, it was the system that was on trial. He thought she was just another arrest. He didn't know she used to write the rules he's now breaking. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Monica Delaney looked over the rim of her glasses, barely hiding her surprise. "Miss Carter," she said. Slowly, "You're choosing to represent yourself." "Yes, Your Honor," Janelle replied. Standing tall, her voice calm but resolute. The entire room shifted. The prosecutor's table, the jury box, even Officer Langley blinked twice, as if realizing, maybe for the first time, that this wasn't going to be the simple, slam-dunk case he thought it was. Judge Delaney gave a subtle nod. Her voice softened just enough. For those who knew her to hear the hidden respect. Very well, proceed. Flashback, 8 years earlier, Washington, D.C. Janelle stood in a different courtroom then, wearing a Navy suit, pacing in front of a jury, cross-examining a crooked D agent, Agent Knox. She said, "How many times have you altered your reports to make a suspect look guilty?" The man shifted. Sweat beaded on his temple. "I don't recall altering anything." Janelle leaned forward. "Because I have evidence showing you did it 5 times. The jury watched her like a hawk. Calm. Precise. Deadly. Back then, she lived for justice. But the system she believed in didn't believe in. Her back, when she tried to investigate her own DA's office for corruption. They blackballed her. Suddenly, no one returned her calls. Offers vanished. Her career stopped. So she came home to Atlanta and built something better, a youth center, a mentorship program, a place where justice wasn't an idea, it was practice." Back to present day, Officer Langley sat on the witness stand, legs wide, shoulders squared. His badge gleamed under the overhead lights. "Tell the court, officer," Janelle said, pacing slowly in front of him. "How many arrests have you made in the past year in the South Side District?" "I don't know the exact number. Ballpark it. Maybe to 100. "How many were black?" Langley hesitated. "I don't keep track of race. You don't need to. The body cam footage does that for you." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Langley's jaw clenched. Janelle turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm submitting an exhibit, 34 arrest videos from Officer Langley's body cam. In 28 of them, the person detained was black. In 16, excessive force was used. In none of them was he ever disciplined." The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Objection. Relevance. It speaks to a pattern, Your Honor." Janelle shot back. "And it proves bias. He didn't arrest me because I interfered. He arrested me because I challenged him." Judge Delaney looked over the files, then nodded. "Objection overruled. Proceed." Langley looked rattled. "Miss Carter," he said, eyes narrowing, "are you trying to make this personal?" She stepped closer. "Not aggressive, not angry, just powerful. It became personal the moment you threw me against your cruiser without cause. But no, this isn't about me. It's about every person you put cuffs on because you thought no one would question you." Outside the courthouse, later that day, the crowd outside had doubled since Monday. People held signs now. "Justice for Janelle. We are not threats. The system's watching." Reporters swarmed anyone who left the courtroom. Janelle's name was on every news crawl in the city. Langley walked to his car with his lawyer, head down. For the first time in his career, he looked like a man unsure of his own authority. Inside the youth center, that night, Malik sat in the empty gym, bouncing a basketball slowly. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. Not anymore. Janelle walked in quietly, still dressed from court. He stood up fast. "Miss Carter, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this." "Hey," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "None of this is your fault. You got arrested cause of me." She shook her head. "I got arrested because someone abused their power. But I'm not afraid of men like Langley. I've taken them down before." Malik blinked. "You used to be a lawyer." She smiled faintly. "Worse, a federal prosecutor." His eyes widened. "For real, for real." Final scene, courtroom, next morning. Janelle walked back into the courtroom alone. No lawyer, no entourage. But when she passed the pews, people stood. One by one. Quiet. Steady. Dozens of them. Black, brown, young, old. People she had mentored, helped, protected. The same community the system tried to silence. Now standing behind her, Judge Delaney entered. Everyone sat. The bailiff called the session to order. Janelle stood. This time, it wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. A badge can't protect you from the truth. The courtroom was still when Janelle rose to her feet. It was the third day of the trial, and something in the air had changed. The jury leaned forward now. The judge sat taller. Even the bailiff, who'd spent the last hour fighting sleep, was wide awake. Janelle Carter adjusted her black blazer, stepped into the center of the room, and locked eyes with Officer Langley. He was already on the stand, looking like every image of authority he'd been trained to be. Clean shave, crisp uniform, American flag pin on his chest, but there was sweat beading under his collar. He didn't look so confident anymore. "Officer Langley," Janelle began, voice calm. "You testified that you were responding to a call about suspicious behavior on 5th and King. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And that you found Malik Thomas, 17 years old, loitering outside a closed laundromat." "That's correct." "Did Malik threaten you?" "No, but he refused to move when I told him to." "Is refusing to move a threat? It's non-compliance. Is non-compliance a crime?" Langley paused. "It can be." Janelle raised an eyebrow. "So the law now punishes teenagers for standing still." Laughter bubbled in the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Langley shifted in his seat. He was disrespectful. "Did he insult you?" "No." "Raise a fist? Reach for anything?" "No." "Then let's talk about what happened next," Janelle said. Walking toward the jury, "You turned your attention to me. Do you remember what I said?" "You said I was assaulting the boy." "Did I raise my voice?" "No." "Did I curse at you?" "No." "Did I step within 6 feet of you?" Langley hesitated. "I don't know. I do. I stayed back. It's on the footage." She tapped her binder. "You grabbed me." "Officer Langley, you twisted my arm and threw me onto the hood of your cruiser. You were interfering." "With what?" "You had already cuffed the boy. You were inciting the crowd by standing there." Langley didn't answer. "Officer Langley," Janelle said, her voice sharpening. "How long have you been in law enforcement?" 17 years. "How many complaints have been filed against you?" He tensed. "None have been sustained." "That wasn't the question." Silence. "How many?" "I don't know." Janelle turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence documents from internal affairs. Officer Langley has had 9 complaints filed against him in the last 4 years. 5 involved excessive force. 4 were for racial profiling. None resulted in discipline." Gasps echoed through the room. The prosecutor objected. The judge overruled it. Langley's face was flushed now. "Tell me, officer," Janelle continued, "have you ever been trained on de-escalation?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you use it with me?" "Because you were escalating." "Was I yelling?" "No." "Threatening?" "No." "Armed?" "No." She stopped, facing the jury. "So what made you feel threatened, officer?" No answer. "Was it my voice, my words, or was it that I, a black woman, dared to question your authority in public?" The courtroom was silent. Langley's jaw locked, but he said nothing. Outside the courthouse, the story had exploded. News vans lined the block. Activists, politicians, former students, all calling for accountability. The footage of Janelle's arrest had become a national talking point. But inside that courtroom, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about the truth. Later that afternoon, Janelle called her final witness, Malik Thomas. He walked slowly to the stand, his hands shaking. He looked at the jury, then at Janelle. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" "Yes, Mum." "Malik," she said softly, "do you remember what happened that night?" "I was just waiting for my cousin. She works late at the gas station. I hang around to walk her home. It's not safe." "What happened when the officer arrived?" "He told me to move. I said I was waiting for someone. He got mad, started yelling. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground." "Did you resist?" "No. I was scared." Janelle nodded. "And then what happened?" "Miss Carter came over. She didn't yell. She just asked what was going on. That's when he grabbed her, threw her on the car like she was nobody." Malik looked down. His voice cracked. "But she's not nobody." The jury watched him. "She saved my life. She taught me how to apply for college, helped me with my essays, took me to my first museum. She's the only reason I ain't out there doing dumb stuff." Tears welled in his eyes. "And now she's the one on trial." Back at the defense table, Janelle exhaled. This case wasn't just hers anymore. It was every kid like Malik. Every person silenced, dismissed, broken by a system that pretended to serve them. Langley looked smaller now. The jury had seen the truth, and the truth, once seen, couldn't be unseen. Some voices don't echo, they haunt. The courthouse steps had turned into a battlefield. Microphones crowded together like soldiers, camera lenses clicking like gunfire. Protesters lined the sidewalk, their chants a rhythm pulsing through the crisp morning air. Justice for Janelle, Drop the charges now. We see you, Langley. Inside, the marble walls could barely mute the sound. The echoes slipped through like smoke. Clinging to every corner of the courtroom, Janelle Carter sat at the defense table, calm on the outside, but her fingers trembled beneath the table, not out of fear, not even from anger, from memory. 15 years ago, a younger Janelle sat in the back of a university lecture hall, a law textbook open on her lap and bruises barely fading beneath her shirt collar. Her mother had always said, if they hit you with silence, hit back with facts. She remembered the professor's voice echoing through the room. The law doesn't guarantee justice. It only offers a tool to fight for it. Janelle had underlined those words 100 times. And now, years later, she was fighting not just for Malik, not just for herself, but for that younger version of her, the one who once walked into police stations, filed complaints that went nowhere, and waited for justice that never came. The judge entered. The courtroom rose. State of Maryland versus Janelle Carter. Continuation of proceedings. The prosecution began with a new tactic, character attacks. Ms. Carter, the DA said, has been involved in several community confrontations over the past decade. She's been vocal, sometimes aggressively so, in opposing police operations in her district. Photos were submitted, videos played. One showed Janelle blocking a police van from entering her school's parking lot during a citywide student protest. This is a pattern of anti-police sentiment, the DA concluded. Janelle stood, slowly. May I respond, Your Honor? The judge nodded. Those protests were peaceful. That van was coming to intimidate students, and I didn't stand there out of defiance. I stood there because a 14-year-old girl had been tackled the week before for asking to use the bathroom during a lockdown drill. If that makes me anti-police, maybe the police need to ask themselves why. A murmur spread. The judge banged his gavel once but didn't say much else. He was listening. Everyone was now. Outside, a new voice entered the fight. A live stream began trending. #educator on trial. Activists, educators, and even celebrities posted their support. Former students of Janelle's came forward, sharing how she had protected them, mentored them, pushed them to believe in themselves. Ms. Carter taught me to dream. She taught me to read the law, not fear it. One video stood out. An elderly black woman, Janelle's former high school teacher, speaking from her front porch. When I saw Janelle in that courtroom, I cried, she said, because that woman's been fighting for justice since she was a little girl, and now she's the one on trial. That ain't justice, that's revenge. Back inside, the prosecution was unraveling. Their star witness Langley was increasingly seen as unreliable. Every line of questioning from Janelle chipped away at his fawade. She'd exposed inconsistencies in his report, shown timestamps that didn't add up, and now she was about to make her boldest move yet. She stood once more and asked the judge to permit the playing of body cam footage that had mysteriously been marked incomplete in the department's official release. Thanks to a whistleblower from the inside, Janelle had the full version. Play the clip, the judge instructed. The room held its breath. On screen, they saw it. Langley approaching Malik, no aggression, just questions. The boy's posture was relaxed. Then Langley's voice rose, sharp, unnecessary. The camera shifted erratically, but you could still hear it. Malik's voice saying, I'm just waiting for my cousin. Then came the moment. Janelle, off camera, calmly saying, Sir, he's a student of mine. I know this kid. Langley responded not with reason, not with restraint, but with rage. Back off, lady. The clip showed him walking toward her. She didn't move. She lifted her hands. I'm just speaking. And then the impact. The camera shook violently. A scream. A thud. The metallic sound of handcuffs being snapped. Silence followed. In the courtroom, nobody moved. The judge leaned back slowly in his chair. The jury's faces were pale. Langley stared straight ahead, frozen. Janelle clicked the remote. The screen went black. This, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, is what happens when authority goes unchecked, when the truth gets redacted, when a teacher, a black woman, becomes a threat simply for existing. But not today. After court adjourned, Janelle stepped into the hallway. The press surged forward, but she held up her hand. "I'm not here to speak for cameras," she said. "I'm here to speak for every voice silenced by fear, every student who thought they were alone, every teacher afraid to challenge power. This isn't about me anymore." She walked away, the crowd parting. Behind her, chants began again, louder this time, echoing up the marble walls like thunder. "We believe her. Justice for Janelle." But as she turned the corner, away from the cameras, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're making enemies, Ms. Carter. Some of them don't play fair." She stared at the screen for a moment, then locked the phone. Justice has a cost, and some people will do anything not to pay it. The rain came down in cold sheets that evening, drumming against the windows of Janelle Carter's apartment like warning knocks. From the night itself, outside, the world was buzzing, hashtags trending, news anchors debating, opinion pieces multiplying like wildfire. Inside, however, the silence was sharp. She sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of chamomile untouched, her phone face down. The message still echoed in her mind. "You're making enemies, Ms. Carter. Some of them don't play fair." She didn't recognize the number. The area code traced back to a blocked line from out of state. She'd received threatening notes before, mostly online hate, anonymous trolls. But this felt different, too specific, too quiet. Janelle wasn't the kind of woman to scare easily. But fear didn't always come loud. Sometimes it settled in the bones like winter. She reached under the table and pulled out a manila folder. Evidence, notes, witness statements, a list of names, some crossed out, some circled. One of them was Officer Langley. The prosecution had doubled down in court. Despite the damning body cam footage, they argued Janelle's interference escalated the situation. The mayor's office had remained silent. The school board suspended her until further notice. But the people outside, they weren't silent at all. Earlier that day, Judge Ames leaned forward, narrowing her eyes at the prosecutor. "You're telling me that even with the new footage, the state still intends to pursue charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," the DA replied, almost smugly. "While the footage raises questions, it doesn't absolve Ms. Carter's actions. She made physical contact with Officer Langley. After being shoved, Janelle's attorney, Marcus Dean, interjected. That's on tape." Ames tapped her pen, annoyed. The public pressure was mounting, and everyone in that room felt it. "You've got 48 hours, she said. "Either present new corroborating evidence, or I'll consider a motion for dismissal." Langley didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. So did Janelle's, because she knew what that meant. They were going to dig. And when the system wants to bury you, it starts with the truth. That night, her doorbell rang, twice, slow, deliberate. She peeked through the peephole. No one. Just the echo of raindrops and an empty hallway. But there, on her welcome mat, sat a single envelope. No address, no stamp, just one word, handwritten, "Enough." Inside was a printed transcript and old sealed report from her first year teaching. A minor dispute with a parent who accused her of bias against male students. The case had been dropped. There was no misconduct. But it looked bad on paper. Someone wanted her rattled. Someone had access. And someone had gone digging. She called Marcus. "They're playing dirty," she said. "Then we play cleaner," he replied. "Not safer, cleaner. We expose it all." He promised to file a motion the next morning to force an internal audit of Langley's previous misconduct reports. Whispers were already surfacing online. Apparently, Janelle wasn't his first incident, but she'd be the first to push this far. The risk, enormous. Meanwhile, across town, Langley sat in the back booth of a bar, dimly lit and quiet. A man slid into the seat across from him, mid-50s, suit, no name offered. "She's digging," Langley muttered. "Let her dig. The dirt's on us all. But she can't afford to throw it." The man replied, "If she wins, she won't." The man passed over a small envelope. "We'll introduce a new narrative. One people are more comfortable believing that she's angry, unstable, maybe even obsessive." Langley hesitated. "And the kid, he doesn't matter. This is about her." The conversation ended with a nod. The next day, the courtroom was eerily quiet. A reporter had released a leaked memo claiming Janelle was being monitored by city officials due to erratic behavior. A photo had surfaced her shouting during a school protest, edited to make her seem violent. None of it was recent, none of it true, but it was working. Even some of the jurors looked at her differently now. Still, Janelle stood tall. "Your Honor," Marcus began, "we request the court compel the Langley personnel files. We believe a pattern of abuse will show this is not an isolated incident." "Denied," the DA snapped. "Those records are sealed. Unseal them," Janelle said firmly. "If I'm on trial for truth, then let's see his." The judge raised an eyebrow. "If you have legal precedent, Mr. Dean, submit it by end of day." They had a sliver of hope, but the walls were closing in. That evening, as Janelle returned home, her mailbox was already pried open. Nothing stolen. Just one new letter inside. Typed ... "You don't belong here. You forgot your place. We'll remind you." She took it straight to Marcus ... He read it twice, then set it down. "This is bigger than Langley." Janelle nodded ... "It always was." Later that night, she opened her laptop. She created a new video file. She spoke directly to the camera. Calm, clear, sharp. "My name is Janelle Carter. I'm a teacher. I'm a daughter. I'm an American citizen. And I'm under attack not just by a man with a badge, but by a system that protects him. This may not go the way I want, but let history record this moment. I didn't back down. I didn't lie. I didn't bend. Whatever happens next, let the world know I stood my ground." She uploaded the video, and then she waited ... The storm outside returned, but this time, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like revolution. Sometimes, justice demands more than patience, it demands a reckoning. The morning after Janelle's video went live, the world woke up with a choice. Either believe the woman who stood alone and unflinching, or cling to a system that punished truth like it was treason. The video had gone viral ... Not just in their town, not just in their state, nationwide. It was everywhere. Black teacher facing charges exposes officer's history of abuse. Whistleblower or agitator? She speaks. The system trembles. Cable news was camped outside her apartment. Local activists had begun organizing protests. Even high school students, her own students, had started tagging walls with her initials. JC equals justice coming. But not everyone was celebrating. At the courthouse, Judge Ames reviewed her morning briefings with a furrowed brow. The city council had sent a friendly reminder that escalating this case might undermine public confidence. A veiled threat, really. She didn't care for politics, but she knew what they meant. "You're at a crossroads, Eleanor," she whispered to herself. She closed the folder, stood up, and looked out her chamber's window. Down below, the crowd was already forming banners, chants, voices demanding truth. And somewhere in the crowd, Langley was watching too. In court, Janelle walked into the courtroom like it was a battlefield. Not with rage, not with fear, with resolve. She wore a navy blue suit, no jewelry, hair pulled back tight. She looked less like a defendant, more like a representative of something bigger. Behind her, rows of supporters packed the benches. Teachers, parents, students. And for the first time, the media. Langley was already seated, his lawyer whispering something in his ear. But the smugness, gone. The storm was real now, and it had a name. Judge Ames entered. The room rose. And the moment she sat down, her gavel struck with rare force. "Let's proceed." The day's agenda was clear. The defense had filed a motion to unseal Officer Langley's prior complaints, citing compelling public interest and relevance to the current charges. The prosecution pushed back hard. "Your Honor, these are unrelated incidents," the DA argued. "Old accusations, most of which never resulted in formal action." Marcus Dean stood, voice steady. "Precisely the point. They never resulted in action, because the system protected him. And now, that pattern of neglect has led to this courtroom." Janelle didn't flinch. Ames looked at her, then at Langley, then at the mountain of paper stacked on her desk. "Motion granted," she said quietly. The courtroom gasped. The DA stood frozen. Langley turned pale. Marcus sat down slowly, stunned. He hadn't expected the win. Not this soon. Later that night, the unsealed records hit the news within hours. 3 misconduct reports, 2 excessive force complaints, 1 internal memo where Langley was recommended for transfer after a pattern of escalating. Civilian encounters, none had ever been made public, but now they were everywhere. Janelle's inbox was flooded with messages from strangers, from fellow educators, from officers' families, one from a woman in Ohio who wrote, "He did the same to my son. We couldn't prove it, but I believe you. Thank you for speaking when we couldn't." But then came the darker messages. "You'll burn for this. We know where your mother lives. You're not a hero. You're a cancer." And one anonymous voicemail whispered in a low, gravelly voice, "Drop this, or your next class will be your last." The breaking point, it was 2 a.m. when the call came. A rock thrown through the window of her mother's house. No one hurt. But the message was clear. No one was off limits. Janelle sat at the kitchen table with Marcus. "They're escalating," she said. Fists clenched. "That means they're scared," Marcus replied. "It also means they're dangerous. So what do we do?" She looked him dead in the eye. "We double down. The community responds." The next day, the protest turned into a march. Thousands. Not hundreds, thousands. Janelle didn't organize it. The people did. They carried signs with her face. They chanted her name. And when she stepped onto the courthouse steps to speak, the city held its breath. "I didn't ask for this fight," she said into the mic. "But I won't walk away from it. Not while truth is being buried under uniforms and bureaucracy. Not while we pretend silence is neutrality. It isn't. Silence is the side of the oppressor. I may lose in this courtroom, but out here, we've already won. Because we are no longer afraid to speak." The crowd erupted. Langley, watching from behind tinted glass, didn't blink. But his hands, shaking. Inside the machine, behind the scenes, pressure mounted. The police union began calling in favors. A memo leaked showing they were considering settlement to avoid further exposure. And then came the twist. An anonymous internal whistleblower stepped forward. A fellow officer. Someone who had worked with Langley for years. And she had audio recordings. Recordings of Langley bragging about how he could push just enough to trigger reactions. And blame them. The key is to escalate subtle. Make him look crazy. Then the cuffs go on. And you're golden. The tapes were real. Undeniable. The city couldn't contain it anymore. The decision. Judge Ames scheduled an emergency hearing. Langley's legal team now looked desperate. The DA asked to drop all charges against Janelle. But Janelle, she didn't just want her name cleared. She wanted accountability. Dropping the charges is not enough, she told the judge. "I want it on record that this court recognizes the abuse I suffered." Ames stared long and hard, then nodded. "So ordered." The charges were dismissed with prejudice, and Langley placed on administrative leave. But Janelle wasn't celebrating yet, because the fight had just begun. That night, as the city buzzed with news, Janelle stood alone on her apartment balcony. The night quiet again. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You may have won the courtroom, but you made enemies in places you'll never see." She smiled faintly. "Good," she typed back. "Let them stay hidden. I'm just getting started." And she meant it, because this wasn't the end. This was the crossroads, and she'd chosen her path. The truth was never on trial. The world was. The day the verdict was due, the city didn't sleep. From sunrise, crowds formed outside the courthouse, not as protesters anymore but as witnesses, as guardians of truth, as people who had been silenced too long and now stood shoulder to shoulder with the woman who had spoken when they couldn't. The air was electric. Journalists reported live from the sidewalks. Helicopters hovered above. School children clutched signs drawn in crayon. Teachers held candles, veterans, clergy. Even former cops had come. Inside the courtroom, it was standing room only. Janelle sat still, her hands in her lap, her jaw set, her eyes calm, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she finally wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside her, flipping pages, but not reading. His voice had found steel in the fire of this case, but his hands still trembled. He knew what this moment meant not just for Janelle, but for the soul of the system he'd once believed in. Langley, flanked by new lawyers and union officials, looked smaller somehow. He hadn't spoken publicly in days. Rumors swirled that the department had cut ties, that old allies had gone silent. His once iron posture had begun to rust. Judge Ames entered. Her robe seemed heavier today. Her eyes landed on Janelle first. The gavel dropped. This court will now issue its findings. The courtroom held its breath. Ames began slowly. This trial was never simply about battery charges or police procedure. It was, whether we admit it or not, about something deeper. She paused. Power and how we choose to wield it. She looked at Langley. Officer Langley's conduct, past and present, reveals a disturbing pattern. A pattern ignored or buried by institutions that should have served as checks, not shields. Then to Janelle. Ms. Carter, this court acknowledges your courage. Your voice not only revealed the flaws of a broken process, it reminded us why truth must be protected, not punished. And then, all charges against the defendant are permanently dismissed. Cheers erupted. People stood. Some wept. Others screamed. Marcus exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Janelle, she remained still, but her eyes closed for a moment. Just one. Long enough to let it sink in. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court recommends an independent inquiry into Officer Langley's conduct, including the newly surfaced audio recordings and past complaints. Langley's team immediately objected. Your Honor, this is outside the scope. Sit down. Counselor, Ames snapped. You and your client have enjoyed silence as protection for too long. That ends today. The gallery exploded in applause. Langley's face was red, jaw clenched, but the mask was off. And behind the rage, there was something else, fear. Outside, the city changed. By afternoon, murals of Janelle began appearing across brick walls and subway stations. One, painted by a high school art student, showed her standing in front of a chalkboard that read, "She taught more than history. She made it." Social media dubbed her the Quiet Storm. Talk shows debated her every word. Senators referenced her in hearings. The president's press secretary was asked about her at a briefing. And while others spoke her name, Janelle disappeared, not from fear, but from purpose. 1 month later, Marcus received a letter, handwritten, no return address, Marcus. The court gave me back my name, but justice isn't a verdict, it's a mission. I'm working with communities across the country now, helping others bring the truth forward. Quietly, deliberately, don't wait for permission. We're the ones we've been waiting for. Stay. Loud. J. Attached was a photo. Janelle in front of a town hall in Mississippi, standing next to a single black mother and her son. Another false arrest. Another fight beginning. Same storm, new ground. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation into Langley and others. 2 more officers came forward. An entire precinct was placed under review. And as for Langley, he was arrested for obstruction and falsifying reports. Not just Janelle's. Dozens, some going back a decade. He was led from his home in handcuffs. No press conference. No badge. Just a perp walk in silence. The same silence he'd once used as a weapon, now turned against him. Epilogue. Months passed. The movement Janelle started took root, not in headlines, but in living rooms, classrooms, courtrooms, workshops trained teachers on legal rights. Former victims began organizing. And a new generation of black youth saw something different when they looked at a courtroom. They saw possibility, not because the system was fixed, but because someone showed it could be challenged. The final scene, Janelle, seated in a folding chair outside a community center, watching children play. A reporter approaches her. Do you feel like a hero now? She looks up, smiles faintly. No, I feel like a teacher. Fade to black. The end.